Last week, when President Biden called out Republicans for their attempts to cut Social Security and Medicare at his State of the Union, Republicans were outraged. Outraged. Many booed. Marjorie Taylor Greene called the president a liar. Senator Rick Scott of Florida was particularly on the defensive because it was Scott, as head of the Senate Republican campaign effort in last year's midterms, who actually called for sunsetting all federal legislation every 5 years, which would include Social Security and Medicare, along with every other federal program. He made it part of his 11-point plan to, quote, rescue America, and then kept trying to deny his position.
The fact that the president is now using this as an attack line, was it a mistake to propose this?
No. First off, nobody believes that I want to cut Medicare or Social Security. I've never said it.
But today, barely a week after that interview, Senator Rick Scott amended that very same budget-cutting plan to exclude Social Security, Medicare, and other essential services. Why amend it if there was nothing wrong with it in the first place, as the White House press secretary noted today?
The president congratulates Senator Scott on joining the post-State of the Union red wave, as we have seen from Republicans, acknowledging that they are, in fact, been attempting to put Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block, because that's what they are actually saying, that they were indeed attempting to do that. So for the past year, and we have the facts, the past year he has explained the absence of an exception by saying, if it's worth keeping, we're going to keep it. But make no mistake, his true colors are undeniable and on the record. They have been speaking at both sides of their mouths here. That's what Republicans in the Senate and Congress more broadly have been doing. Cutting Medicaid and Social Security benefits is a long-standing passion of Senator Scott's, as it is for a majority of the House Republicans who comprise the Republican Study Committee and many of his Senate colleagues, ranging from John Thune and to Ron Johnson. So we thank Senator Scott for continuing to share his heart with the world.
I think the word she was looking for there at the end was boom. Doug Jones is a former Democratic senator from Alabama. He is now a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, and he joins me now along with former Republican staffer Tara Setmeyer, who is still with us. Doug Jones, we now see some of your former Republican colleagues like Rick Scott basically having to acknowledge that they were trying to cut Social Security and Medicare. How much damage has President Biden's attack from the State of the Union done to the Republican Party?
I think it's done a lot, Mehdi. I think it really has done a lot. Look, what President Biden has done, he has brought this out from a long-standing position of the Republican Party. This goes back many, many years. Newt Gingrich, Dick Armey, even Mitch McConnell in 2005 tried his best to get Democrats to support a George W. Bush plan to at least privatize Social Security. So this is a long-standing position of the Republican Party. They can talk about it now and they can express outrage and indignation, but the fact is they're on record. And I guarantee you, Maddie, I guarantee that the next Republican president with a Republican Congress will absolutely try to either eliminate or cut Social Security. And Medicare. There's no question about it.
So, Tara, Mitch McConnell went out of his way to suggest Rick Scott might be in trouble in his own state because Florida has an elderly population. That's Mitch McConnell. There's no love lost between those two men these days. Is Rick Scott vulnerable, in your view, at the next election, next year's election in Florida? Is that a seat that Democrats could potentially pick up because of the Social Security Medicare issue in an election when Senate Democrats are supposed to be on the defensive in 2024?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, it does create an area of vulnerability for him. He was vulnerable going in as governor in 2018 against Bill Nelson, because let's not forget that Senator Scott was presided over one of the largest Medicare fraud cases in the country. The company that he ran had a $1.7 billion fine against them for Medicare fraud, which if that didn't upset seniors in Florida enough to deny him the Senate seat in 2018, I'm not sure that it'll have enough of an effect in 2024. before because of how far to the right Florida has become. And a lot of that, that's a whole different segment about how Democrats have missed opportunities to build an infrastructure in Florida. But I'm hoping that they're learning from their mistakes and will put up a good candidate and put up a good fight. But, this rivalry between Rick Scott and Mitch McConnell is really fascinating because we have not seen anyone take on Mitch McConnell this way in many, many years. And the fact that Rick Scott is aligning with Ted Cruz, that's their alliance now, that no longer is Ted Cruz the most annoying person for Mitch McConnell in the Senate. I don't know if Rick Scott wants to wear that as a badge of valor or not.
Imagine how desperate you have to be to align yourself with Ted Cruz.
Correct.
But I'm glad you raised the Medicare fraud case because people forget about that. And Rick Scott cares so much about the Medicare budget that his company has to pay a fine for defrauding Medicare. Doug Jones, Mike Lee. Let's talk about another senator, another Republican ex-colleague of yours, Mike Lee of Utah, who acted just shocked. Look at that face. He was aghast when Biden dared suggest Republicans might want to cut Social Security and Medicare. We'll see it a few times. Aghast. But here is the same Mike Lee in private.
I'm here right now to tell you one thing that you probably haven't ever heard from a politician. It will be my objective to phase out Social Security, to pull it up by the roots and get rid of it.
I mean, Rick Scott just wants to sunset it. Mike Lee wants to pull it up by the roots. We were talking on the show about Fox hosts saying one thing on air and one thing in private. Republican senators seem to do the same.
I think it's not just Republican senators. I think, thanks to you guys in the media, Mehdi, for bringing those and saving all of those clips and all of the things that have been said over the many, many years. Again, this is not something new, and they can feign their indignation and express their outrage. But the fact is, for decades, they have been wanting to do this. They didn't want to vote for it. They didn't vote for it to begin with. They fought Social Security. They fought Medicare. And they have been wanting ever since it was implemented to get rid of it, to eliminate it, to move it to the private sector. So I think as we talk about this more and more, I think Democrats really ought to keep it in the forefront. And I do think that this gives an opening for Democrats in Florida against Rick Scott. He barely won that election 6 years ago in Florida. I mean, it was a razor-thin margin. And so and now we've got even more seniors in Florida. I think that if Democrats can find a good candidate, there's going to be a real opening in Florida because of this issue and this issue alone.
Let's talk about another Florida Republican, Tara. Ron DeSantis comes to mind. When he was in the House, he was very keen on cutting Social Security and Medicare. And there is reporting now that Donald J. Trump, who's gone out of his way to say he won't touch Social Security and Medicare, is going to use that as a cudgel to beat DeSantis with in any GOP primary.
Well, they should. I mean, the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid entitlement issue is one that, to Senator Jones's point, yes, it's something that has been talked about for decades because we are heading off a fiscal cliff with our entitlements, and this is something that has to have bipartisan problems. I mean, bipartisan solutions at some point. However, no politician wants to do that now because they know that it's politically unpopular, particularly in a state like Florida. So, of course, Donald Trump recognizes that Ron DeSantis is nipping at his heels, and he's going to use this. And in a state like Florida that has the largest senior population, and they vote, that is absolutely a vulnerability. And Democrats should continue to use this the way Republicans used defund the police. Use this against the Republicans over and over and over and over again.
I think they're planning on doing that.
For Democrats.
I think they're planning on doing that.